Between the 3rd and 7th of November 2022, I was given access to the Hitman 3 Freelancer Technical Test, an upcoming game mode IO Interactive are developing for the game, to be released on 26th of January 2023. Now, I'd like to say that it was for my insightful Hitman content, but it was more likely because it was pure luck, as signups were done via a public mailing list and I just somehow managed to get picked. I'll take the win though. I streamed the footage you're seeing over on Twitch and later uploaded it to YouTube the following day, partially because Twitch burnout really wrecks me. As should be obvious from the footage on screen, if you don't want to be spoiled on potential future mechanics to Freelancer mode, then you may want to skip watching this and watch something else instead. However, for everyone else, here are my thoughts with the caveat that everything here is not final. Here are my first impressions, subject to change. The customizable Safehouse is simply a joy to look at. Well done, art team. Seriously, you deserve all the praise you can get. I managed to record some lovely B-roll before the servers went down, so enjoy some pretty scenery shots of the Safehouse that I managed to record with the free cam, and yes, the free cam strangely worked on the CTT. I feel like the atmosphere has been nailed here. The basement is cold and productive, which nicely contrasts with the upstairs when I was finally able to unlock it, which is nice and warm and homely. I feel like this will be worth unlocking for players, if nothing else but for the Safehouse interactions, which are genuinely quite heartwarming and give 47 some much needed personality in that department. Like, I just loved doing random stuff to pass the time. The wood chopping in particular is a favourite of mine. I have issues with it, but I'll talk about that later. It really does make you feel like, well, a freelance assassin. The optional modifiers for each contract is something I rather like, allowing you to get more mercers, the in-game currency, just pretend they're continental coins, to encourage riskier and varied playstyles. Hell, some optional modifiers reward you with killing guards in a specific way, which does shake things up. The reuse of ghost crates within the level as stashes is a very cool idea. I dislike the random nature of them, but that's more of a me thing more than anything. I did warm up to these as the days went on, oftentimes relying on them to get certain kills, but they're honestly pretty well balanced as things go. There's usually something useful I can take, and since 47 has infinite inventory space in game, there's no real reason to not ever take something from a ghost crate. And yes, I'm calling them ghost crates from now on. I can't unsee them as anything but that. I know this is a side effect of this mode taking Silent Assassin into the back seats, but I do like that Trespassing is now very lenient. Think the SA rules prior to their rework in Hitman 2, so getting outed isn't as nearly as annoying here. Really, this should just be in the base game, if I'm being honest. The ability to look at guns is something I've wanted in the main game for years. I love it. It reminds me so much of those early 2000s model views you unlocked for completing games. Hell, it reminds me a lot of the recent Tomb Raider trilogy, where picking up artifacts lets you find things for XP, or the weapons you unlock in Payday 2. Sadly, this only works when opening a ghost crate or when in the Safehouse, not from the menus, which is a bit of a shame, but still, that's something I can totally live with. I do like the map-related side objectives. These really do feel like side quests. On any map, there's usually a courier carrying mercers for you to pick up if you kill, pacify or sedate them, a weapons dealer to let you buy weapons with mercers, and sometimes a safe, though strangely those were not on all maps, which again awarded mercers for unlocking. The safes in particular are the most side questy, requiring you to hunt down laptops and file binders and scan them with your camera, which unlocked the safe and let you open it. There's also an optional prestige objective that asks you to blow the bloody doors off.
3, 2, 1, go!
There we go.
Speaking of, prestige objectives are a genuinely good idea. They're optional, but the game implicitly expects you to take at least one to, well, make your playstyle a little bit more varied. There are issues with them, but we'll get to that. Right now, the prestige objectives are heavily reliant on RNG, and don't appear to have any kind of contingency rules set in place to not give you objectives that you literally cannot complete. And then there are the timed objectives, which are just too strict. Not only that, but the titles for them were not clear, and their descriptions oftentimes were worded quite strangely. The one I completed was timed knockouts, which actively forced me to be risky in the worst way possible, KOing random NPCs just to satisfy the timer, all the while killing my target. Really, this is just a bad modifier made worse by the timer, and you should not ask the player to take needless risks, which this definitely did. This is basically the boon system from Hades, which lets you get a god's power set when you complete specific dungeons to help you escape the underworld. Note that the game tells you what it does, and from that you can make an informed decision. Freelancer, with its prestige objectives, currently doesn't do that, and that is a problem. In concept, I do like the gear system. Certain weapons have weights attached to them to make them harder to bring in, which is fine in concept. However, the issue is that a lot of the weapons are not weighted very well. The Psyker is still as OP as it's ever been, and only costs 3 gear slots to take with you once you get it, same for the Kalma 2. Out of the 6 that you start with, and you permanently gain more on certain mastery levels. You will be able to take OP items comfortably with something else. In fact, I was able to take my HWK-21 Covert homemade silenced pistol with a Psyker, despite the fact that the game mode weights silenced weapons as being inherently powerful still. Hell, they're quite costly to buy from merchants. This is an issue that also plagues other games with inventory management, in that you're constantly switching stuff in and out of your inventory to either get below the carry limit, and it's just as much a hassle to do there as it is to do here. IOI needs to reweight the Psyker and other silenced weapons to actually force you to think about what you bring in, so 7 slots out of the 9 instead of 3 out of 9. I'm not a fan of the rewards crate system in the Safehouse. If you complete or fail a contract, Diana gives you a crate with one of several Freelancer tools. Lockpicks, oil and water canisters, which is actually kind of nice to see, those were previously unused, Psyker/Kalma pistols, micro remote explosives, you get the gist. About 50 odd items if I recall correctly. Really, I'd rather Diana just give me something over a chest of many possibilities, or at the very least let me order a weapon to be delivered to the Safehouse online, which would then cost mercers. Hitman Sniper and its sequel The Shadows does this for weapon parts, and as with any RNG box, it's just more frustrating than fun to open one. It's a bit of a red flag in my book. I'll be fair, everything I've gotten has been useful to some extent, but it still puts me in the same guessing game mindset, especially in the early game when you rely a lot on RNG in other parts of Freelancer. A consistent reward for completion would be a good incentive in my opinion. The costs for silenced weapons from merchants seems a little unfair, which, while I understand why they'd be so expensive, IOI should balance around their silenced capabilities, not the fact that they're better in other aspects. Steady aim for the silver baller is far less useful than silenced shooting is, and generally speaking, my HWK Covert homemade silenced pistol, and yes, I'm saying that every time, was good enough for all situations, and was my most permanent unlock because of it. And because merchants have RNG attached to what they sell per level, you're not guaranteed to get the higher tier sorts of weapons. In fact, the only time I got a higher tier silenced pistol was from killing assassins from Syndicate meetups. I'd never bought a silver baller, I never had the chance to. The picking of random NPCs to be targets for contracts is really weird and inconsistent. Like, in one of my levels, one of Yuki's guards is a target. Unfortunately, because he doesn't react to any kind of distraction, being a super enforcer, you can't isolate him, meaning you have to wait for ages to pull the classic dwindling party scenario on the other people around him, or go loud and deal with the consequences of Hitman's combat AI that is notoriously segmented and a bit crap. Those map objectives I mentioned earlier, yeah, one of them was to push the target over a ledge, which just isn't possible, as Yuki goes nowhere near a ledge, and neither does the target tailing her, meaning this is an example of the stipulation not correlating with the target's routine, despite the fact they had every opportunity to do so. Another target I had was just some random ether scientist, which isn't bad by itself, but her routine was tiny and collateral damage potential was quite high, which in this mode doesn't mean much. We'll get to that in a sec. But this does highlight quite well the problem with using background NPCs as targets, as by design, they're not meant to be treated like main mission targets are, and so don't have the same AI routines, opportunities, and are deliberately rather one note. It's basically like playing higher stakes contracts mode. I'm of the opinion that traditionally locked doors that require a key or lockpick to open need to be unlocked on all levels on this mode. I felt too boxed in a lot of the time, and routes that I'd be able to take in the main mission are simply not open to me. One of the first things I always bought in the later days is a crowbar or a lockpick, mostly to make traversal less of a nightmare. Hell, in the Ether Lab you have to pacify people in the labs to get in and out, so it may be wise to put keycards for the doors in the science labs too. I don't mind the electronic locks being shut as is. Those are like that with the deliberate intention of locking the map up a bit more, but keyed lock doors are especially prevalent on the 2016 maps and a fair few of the H2 maps too, and getting around them is very annoying without any kind of breaking those doors open. Having conflicting complications tends to lead to a skewed and inconsistent playstyle. Instead of going in with some kind of plan, you rely on boxes and RNG to make it so at least one of the complications that can be completed for some coinage. From my testing, this just feels inconsistent and bad, and doesn't feel like the fallback that IOI thinks it does. On a related note, the silent sniper kill complications are too situational. Hell, the loud sniper kill complication is too situational. These kinds of tasks simply cannot be done early game, as mercers are harder to find and get, and snipers are quite expensive and harder to find, silenced ones in particular. Either make sniper rifles cheaper, or just merge the two complications into one so it's much easier to complete at more levels of the campaign. Map elements. As of right now, there's no way to see crates, safes or couriers unless you've found them on the level map, and by that I mean it appears to be proximity based. Please change this so they are omnipresent icons on the map a la the merchants, or for a base game example, the targets you have to find. It's less hassle for the player. Take it from me, blindly running around the map to find them only serves to pad out the play session, which just isn't fun, believe me. When it comes to game balance, players have always requested more freedom in approach, so you're not always tied down by aiming for the silent assassin rank. I don't see the problem with aiming for the highest score in the game, because that's kind of what this game is balanced around, but still, I do agree more approaches are needed. However, this mode has gone in the total opposite direction, in that there's basically no punishment for dicking about and getting into trouble, and the game won't punish you for it unless there's a specific complication for, say, only headshots or silent assassin suit only. The chaos you make is contained to a specific section of the map. The core game is designed around that, so players can escape bad situations easier. But in this mode, it means you can get away scot-free as long as you have decent map knowledge. On stream, I was of the mindset of, there's no consequences for my actions. If someone else sees me do anything illegal, I just kill the guards and civilians and salt the earth of witnesses so new witnesses aren't created. The bodies don't even need to be hidden, they can get spotted laying on the floor, and it won't matter, which is ass backwards logic to the base game experience. And I'm sorry, there's freedom of approach, and then there's throwing core stealth game concepts the game is deliberately designed around out the sodding window. Freedom of approach should not mean compromising the core puzzle aspects of the game. If there's no penalty for civilian kills or murder sprees, then I may as well just be playing, well, Hades. To fix this, might I suggest what Payday 2 does, in that there's a cash deduction for each civilian you kill, cleaner costs as the game calls it, and the AI gets increasingly aggressive, and killing civilians keeps you in custody longer, so trades take longer. And while the cleaner costs are but a drop in the ocean for a XXX2 player like myself, these drawbacks still put players into a last resort mentality. Players only tend to kill civilians either by accident, them running in front of gunfire, or to maintain stealth when the whole crew runs out of cable ties, which doesn't really happen all that much. To apply the same mechanics for Hitman, a mercer deduction for each civilian killed for cleaner costs, or hell, just Diana docking your pay for being unprofessional.
Really, 47? I thought I taught you better than this. Stop that!
Let's get those Magnum Don Perry
In my view, this would set the game on a better path and a better mindset, and as you could still encourage loud kills via the prestige and optional objectives, but it will still leave open the option to pacify civilians and hide them away somewhere, making kill everyone scenarios much less incentivized. Right now, I could just dome every head that'd be any trouble to me as I go, with no drawbacks. I shouldn't have to tell you, Interactive, but that's not good game design. There needs to be a base payout for mercers. A contract is a contract. I expect some payment out of it at base, not as an afterthought. The player should not get mercers solely from crates, couriers and safes and completing the complications, which are mostly RNG based. That's simultaneously too many avenues of mercer money amassing and too little mercers gotten as payout for doing those. Couriers tend not to have that many mercers when you KO them, and safes are not on all levels, so the 30+ mercer reward simply isn't available all the time. The Syndicate encounters simply have far too many mechanics going on. Assassins, lookouts, the amount of tells. Really, it's a strange hodgepodge of ideas. Each mechanic is good on its own. The hunter and hunted aspect of finding assassins, the where's Wally aspect of finding the Syndicate leader, and the lookouts are okay, I guess. But each one obscures the other and makes it very tricky to stay focused. The Syndicate hits just become too claustrophobic mechanics-wise, and they felt really annoying after a while to complete. At one point, I got outed because of this issue. There were so many things to think about, and I just didn't see the one enforcer on the minimap. Playing back this footage, I think was actually a lookout, but I can't be sure. And really, is that surprising? If my eyes are darting around all over the place to check the other's mechanics statuses, then I'm gonna focus less and less on stuff I think I know from the base game experience. Some of these mechanics need extraditing. The lookouts are basically pointless, just acting as super enforcers for assassins and leaders. The assassins are just plain odd and don't really do all that much. They're not any better than the levels guards in terms of combat AI. The showdown should focus on finding the Syndicate leader and having an assassin that tails them close by. Something that needs fixing is the look and tells system. It actively lied to me. On at least 2 of my runs, I ruled out all possible subjects because none of them fitted the looks I was given, so I had no specific prime target to follow. It wasn't fun, it was very monotonous, and was a very big exercise in frustration to traipse around the level, refinding potential targets. This sort of gameplay can be fun, but only if the game doesn't lie to you. I'm aware this is likely a bug, but still. The weapons having rarity levels, while that does make sense on the surface, it only really serves to lock players out of potential mercers from completing prestige objectives, and not much else. This system just doesn't work in the way I thought, and hampered my experience, not enhanced it. The Safehouse mastery is very grindy and simply goes too slowly. On the forums, this was more mixed. Some people found it fine, others had the same complaint I did. I found the room unlocking just to be tedious. When I unlock the upstairs, I expect all the upstairs rooms to unlock, and all the routes to get upstairs too. Make people grind for redecorating, sure, that actually makes sense, but it feels quite arbitrary to lock off rooms 47 cannot access for potentially even 100 hours into the game mode. It feels arbitrary and stupid to literally look behind a sheet of glass to a room you can't unlock yet because you haven't gotten enough mastery, despite there already being boxes in there. It just doesn't feel right, you know? Again, Payday 2 doesn't do this. In its Safehouse system, it has all the rooms unlocked, and you earn and pay Continental coins to upgrade rooms and therefore add more interactions and fancier decor. Something like that would be better, I think, than arbitrary room unlocking requirements. The punishment for failing any Syndicate mission is just too severe. I was under the impression that failing a Syndicate hit would put me back to the previous one, and not what it does in game, and just wipe 4 hours of gameplay off the face of the earth.
It deletes all of it! Oh my god! So they're not checkpoints at all! Oh, that is so stupid. Yeah, that's way too much of a problem. So it's not checkpointed or anything, you have to start from the beginning. Lovely. Absolutely hilarious. And by hilarious, I mean very unfair. 1 hour and 48 minutes out the window. Hope you're happy, IMO Interactive. That sounded too harsh, didn't it? Sorry.
Losing items you are carrying makes sense. Losing half your mercers makes sense. But losing stuff in your safe house? Did Voice even get robbed or something? Why does an unlock that I got specifically from Mastery get removed? Look, roguelite and roguelike games are about randomization, risks, and a path that can be reset if you fail. Hell, it's a part of Hades' narrative. But that game, and most of the rogues I know, are not stealth games. They're usually fighting and or hack and slash games that are usually rather quick. Levels in Hitman take a long time to do anything simply by the nature of the genre. It's not a good first experience to learn your hours of playing is all for naught, save for Mastery to open up arbitrary parts of the safe house. This is why a game like Hitman needs to make the time spent per level shorter, not longer, and have checkpoints for all encounters, if it's going to be a rogue-esque game mode. It is far too punishing as is, and I'll even say that having certain contracts fail your campaign should also go the way of the dodo. Make them harder, sure, but don't remove hours of progress. That's just bitchy and unfair. Look, I had fun with this game mode, despite my negativity that seems to have taken up half the video. It really was a breath of fresh air, as much as it is a cliche to say that. Seriously, about every single person who has played this mode has said a variation of that. I'm not kidding. But it was a stinky breath of fresh air, and I'm a little concerned of how many of the flaws I've mentioned here are being downplayed and not being publicly discussed in the greater Hitman user base, giving off the impression that it's basically done, when that's not my experience at all. To reiterate, I'm Interactive, I like the game mode's concept, but there's a lot of flaws surrounding its execution at present. The weapon weighting, the arbitrary safe house room unlocks, the mercer economy, the punishing campaign track. Had this been released as is, and not in this closed tech test, I don't think I would have given Freelancer as much chance as I have done. I wouldn't mind you doing a second closed beta just to keep players informed of new ideas, but as it is right now, I feel like this plays far worse than Elusive Target Arcade did when that first released. At the very least, that had a consistent, if very boring meta, and didn't outright lie to me on multiple occasions. And with that, I thank you very much for watching. I have so many other projects I need to do now.